Imagine waking up one morning, opening your Linux desktop like you always do, and seeing a notification that feels almost unreal at first. A new LibreOffice update has landed, and not just any update, but a release that quietly signals something much bigger than a routine version bump. LibreOffice 26.2 is here, and even if you've been using free and open source software for years, this one makes you stop for a second and think about how far things have come and where they're heading next. This isn't just about a few new buttons or some under-the-hood tweaks. This update feels like a statement, almost a declaration, that the open-source desktop is not only alive, but evolving in ways that directly challenge the idea that serious productivity must come from closed ecosystems. For a long time, LibreOffice has been the dependable workhorse. It's the suite people install because it's free, because it respects their freedom, because it runs on Linux without drama, and because it opens their documents without complaining. But if we're being honest, many users still thought of it as the good enough option. Good enough for writing documents, good enough for spreadsheets, good enough if you don't want to pay a subscription. LibreOffice 26.2 is the release that tries to flip that mindset on its head. It doesn't feel like it's chasing anyone anymore. Instead, it feels confident, mature, and surprisingly bold. The first thing you notice when you spend real time with this version is how much attention has been paid to the overall experience. Not in a flashy, gimmicky way, but in a calm, thoughtful way that makes everyday work smoother. Opening Writer, Calc, or Impress feels more immediate, more responsive, like the software is finally getting out of your way instead of constantly reminding you that you're using a complex office suite. There's a sense that the developers have spent time watching how real people use LibreOffice day after day, and then quietly fixed hundreds of small annoyances that never made headlines but always slowed things down. Writer, the heart of LibreOffice, for many users, feels especially refined in this release. Long documents with images, tables, and references behave more predictably. Scrolling through a 100-page report no longer feels like pushing against resistance. Editing large academic papers or technical documentation feels closer to how it should have always been, smooth, stable, and focused. Text layout, spacing, and rendering feel more consistent across different systems, which might sound boring, but if you've ever shared a document with someone and then panicked because it looked slightly different on their machine, you know how important this is. One of the quiet revolutions in LibreOffice 26.2 is how it handles compatibility. For years, the question around LibreOffice was always the same. Will this document look right when I send it to someone using a different Office suite? This release doesn't magically erase decades of proprietary formats overnight, but it makes a noticeable leap forward. Opening complex documents created elsewhere feels less like rolling dice and more like a predictable process. Fonts behave better, layouts shift less, and even complicated tables and embedded objects survive the transition more gracefully. It's not perfect, but it's good enough that you stop worrying about it after a while. And that's a huge psychological shift. Calc, LibreOffice's spreadsheet tool, is another area where 26.2 shows real ambition. Spreadsheets are where many people draw the line and say they need proprietary software because their work depends on it. This version of Calc feels like it's trying to erase that line. Large datasets feel more manageable, calculations update more efficiently, and the overall responsiveness makes it easier to experiment without fear of freezing the application. If you work with spreadsheets all day, these improvements aren't just nice to have, they directly affect how tired you feel at the end of the day. What's especially interesting is how LibreOffice 26.2 treats modern workflows. It doesn't pretend the world is the same as it was 10 years ago. People collaborate, they share files across platforms, they switch between laptops and desktops, and they expect their tools to keep up. This release feels much more aware of that reality. File handling feels smarter, cloud integration is less awkward, and working with shared documents doesn't feel like a second-class experience anymore. LibreOffice still respects the idea that your files are yours and not locked into someone else's server, but it also acknowledges that flexibility matters. Impress, often the most overlooked part of the suite, also gets a noticeable boost. Presentations feel more fluid, transitions are smoother, and working with multimedia doesn't feel like you're constantly testing the limits of what the software can handle. For educators, students, and professionals who rely on presentations to communicate ideas, this makes a real difference. You spend less time fighting the tool and more time thinking about what you actually want to say. Another big theme in LibreOffice 26.2 is performance, and not just on high-end machines. One of the quiet promises of open-source software has always been that it should respect your hardware, not punish you for not having the latest specs. This version feels more considerate in that way. Older laptops, modest desktops, and systems running lightweight Linux distributions all benefit from the work done here. Startup times feel shorter, memory usage feels more controlled, and overall stability is noticeably improved. This matters enormously in parts of the world where upgrading hardware isn't always an option, and it reinforces LibreOffice's role as a truly global tool. Accessibility is another area where this update shows maturity. LibreOffice has always claimed to be for everyone, but 26.2 feels like it's taking that claim more seriously. Navigation feels clearer, keyboard shortcuts feel more consistent, and screen reader support feels more reliable. These changes might not make flashy headlines, but for users who depend on them, they change everything. Software that truly works for everyone doesn't just add accessibility features as an afterthought, it weaves them into the core experience, and that's what this release feels like it's trying to do. Security and trust are also part of the story here, even if they're mostly invisible. LibreOffice 26.2 benefits from years of community scrutiny, code audits, and careful development practices. In a world where productivity software is increasingly tied to accounts, subscriptions, and data collection, there's something refreshing about using a tool that simply does its job without constantly asking for more. This version reinforces that feeling. It feels solid, predictable, and respectful, which are qualities that are becoming surprisingly rare in modern software. One of the most interesting things about LibreOffice 26.2 isn't any single feature, but the message it sends. It suggests that open-source productivity software has reached a point where it no longer needs to apologize or explain itself. You don't install LibreOffice because you can't afford something else. You install it because it's good, because it's powerful, and because it aligns with your values. This release leans into that confidence. It doesn't try to copy every trend from proprietary software, but it also doesn't ignore the expectations of modern users. There's also a sense of long-term thinking baked into this update. LibreOffice isn't chasing quick wins or flashy features that will look good in a press release and then be forgotten. Instead, it feels like the foundation has been strengthened so that future releases can build on something solid. That's the kind of work that doesn't always get immediate praise, but pays off over time. When you use LibreOffice 26.2, you get the feeling that this project is thinking in years, not months. For Linux users especially, this release feels like a validation. The desktop Linux experience has improved dramatically over the years, but productivity software has always been a key piece of the puzzle. LibreOffice 26.2 fits naturally into modern Linux desktops. Whether you're using something sleek and minimal or something traditional and familiar, it doesn't feel out of place, and it doesn't feel like a compromise. It feels like part of a complete ecosystem that's finally comfortable in its own skin. Even for users on other platforms, there's something compelling about this version. LibreOffice 26.2 doesn't feel like the Linux alternative anymore. It feels like a serious cross-platform productivity suite that just happens to be open source. That distinction matters because it changes how people approach it. Instead of asking whether LibreOffice can replace something else, users start asking whether they actually need anything else at all. What really makes this update stand out is how it affects daily habits. After a while, you stop thinking about LibreOffice as software you're evaluating and start treating it as software you trust. You open it without hesitation, you save your work without worrying, and you share your documents without second-guessing. That kind of confidence doesn't come from marketing. It comes from consistent, thoughtful improvement over time. And LibreOffice 26.2 feels like the result of exactly that process. There's also a broader cultural impact to consider. LibreOffice is more than just an office suite, it's a symbol of what community-driven development can achieve. Every release like this challenges the idea that innovation only comes from massive corporations with huge budgets. LibreOffice 26.2 shows that a global community of contributors, working together over many years, can produce software that stands shoulder to shoulder with the biggest names in the industry. As you dig deeper into this release, you start to notice how many rough edges have been smoothed out. Dialogues feel clearer, options feel better organized, and the overall interface feels more cohesive. It's not a radical redesign that forces you to relearn everything, but it's refined enough that the whole experience feels more modern. That balance is hard to achieve, and it shows a lot of respect for existing users while still moving forward. For students, LibreOffice 26.2 feels like a gift. It offers a full-featured, professional-grade Office suite without asking for money or locking features behind subscriptions. That alone can shape how people think about software and ownership early in their careers. When your first serious work is done in tools that respect you and your data, it sets a different baseline for what you expect from technology. For professionals, especially freelancers and small teams, this release offers something equally valuable: independence. You can work on your own terms using tools that don't change their business model out from under you. LibreOffice 26.2 feels stable and predictable. In a world where software often feels anything but, that stability is a feature in itself. There's also something to be said about how this update reinforces the idea of local-first computing. While the industry pushes harder and harder toward everything being online, LibreOffice continues to prove that powerful modern software can run perfectly well on your own machine. You don't need a constant internet connection to be productive, and your files don't need to live on someone else's servers by default. LibreOffice 26.2 doesn't reject the cloud, but it doesn't depend on it either, and that balance feels increasingly important. As the days go by and more people install this update, the conversation around LibreOffice is likely to shift. Instead of asking whether it's ready, people will start asking what's next. That's a good place to be. LibreOffice 26.2 doesn't feel like the end of a journey. It feels like a milestone along the way. A moment where the project pauses, looks around, and realizes how much it has achieved. In the end, what makes LibreOffice 26.2 feel special isn't just the features or the performance improvements, but the feeling it leaves you with. It feels calm, confident, and capable. It feels like software that knows what it is and isn't trying to be something else. For users who value freedom, reliability, and long-term thinking, this release feels like a quiet victory. So when people say that a big new LibreOffice update has just dropped and that version 26.2 changes everything, it doesn't sound like empty hype. It sounds like recognition of a turning point. LibreOffice has grown up, not by abandoning its principles, but by fully embracing them and proving that they still matter. And if this is what LibreOffice looks like now, it's genuinely exciting to imagine where it goes from here.